Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Evan Preparis. Brenna Calvert is not with us today. She is currently in Stratton, Vermont on build crew for the North American OCR Championships. So we're going to have her on, or actually, this will probably be released afterwards. So by the time you hear this, you'll probably already listen to the Brenna Calvert episode where we give a preview of NORAM Championships. Today's episode is brought to you by Inside Tracker. So Inside Tracker, you may have heard me talk about it with Rhea Coble when she was on the podcast. They draw your blood at a local lab, so I went to Quest Diagnostics. Just super easy to schedule. You walk in, 5 minutes later, they draw your blood, and then they send it off to a company, and then they actually analyze it and provide you feedback as far as your nutritional needs, what you could improve and where you're lacking things. So for Endure the Gauntlet, we're doing 3 tests. We're doing one beforehand, which is the one I just took. We're doing one immediately after to show the detrimental effects of ultra-distance OCR, and then one a month later. So hoping it'll, 1, show some science behind the suffering, and then 2, allow me to recover and bounce back faster because we got a bunch of big races right around the corner, including World's Toughest Mudder after my Endure the Gauntlet. So if you're interested in some of their programs, they have some pretty cool stuff. Go ahead and check out their website, insidetracker.com. All right, today on the podcast, when we started this podcast, we had a couple main goals. One was to give back to some of our sponsors that have been helping out support Conquer on the Pro Team and Strength and Speed, which I think we've been doing pretty good. 2 was to support and showcase some of the local or smaller OCR series, which I also think we've been doing pretty good this year. And then 3 was, I believe that lessons for OCR have already been solved from other sports. So I really wanted to bring in other athletes from outside of the OCR world and bring in some of those lessons learned and try to apply them to OCR. So today on the podcast, we have a cage fighter. So I should have asked to pronounce his name beforehand, but Michael Adsit, is that right?
That is correct.
All right. Michael Adsit is on the podcast. So 22 years ago, he was a former cage fighter who was 2-2. So he did 2 fights through a promoter and 2 fights underground. Decided to get out of fighting for his health. He's now 47 with 3 kids. He's been married for 18 years. And he recently found OCR this year. So he's super excited about it. And Miles Keller introduced us. So I figured we'd do a podcast. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. So cage fighter, I mean, that's an interesting fitness choice. So how did that start?
Oh, man, where do I begin? I'd have to say that 6-7 years old. I was never a violent person growing up, just for the record. I don't think I'd ever been in a fight in my life, but maybe once. I used to go downstairs in the basement in our house, and our grandma lived with us. And I remember her watching these old polka shows on TV. When I had to get out of my parents' hair, I'd go down to my grandma. And after the polka shows was like pro wrestling, and they would have like the Super Destroyers, Dick the Bruiser, Nick Bockwinkel, all these big names back in the day. And they'd have these cage fights, and my grandmother was just passionate about pro wrestling to the point where she would throw things at the television, and she kind of had this European accent, and she would like curse the TV and scream at the wrestlers. And I watched this, and I'm like, wow. And I kind of fed off of her energy. And so when Mom and Dad were gone, I'd go upstairs and I'd get out my all my stuffed animals and my brothers like Winnie the Poohs, and I'd find empty boxes. And I'd try to recreate all this stuff that I was watching on TV. And I'd get up on top of the couch, and my parents are up in heaven thinking, "Oh my God, you did what?" And I would jump off the top of the couch and do like elbow smashes onto like Paddington Bear and Winnie the Pooh, and I would just beat these things up, and I'd make my own crowd roaring sounds, and it was just really crazy. I had all this energy for wrestling. The cage matches, I just thought I was fascinated by it. And so, fast forwarding, in grade school, we were introduced to wrestling in 3rd or 4th grade, something like that. And my parents always hated this because they worked hard for the clothes that I'd wear at school. And whenever wrestling came around, they knew it because I would always find a way to tear a hole in the crotch of the wrestler jeans that they bought me, and I'd have to come home and explain why they were ruined. Well, Mom, it was wrestling, and so but they enjoyed the fact that I was liking it. My PE teacher saw that I had a pretty good gift for it, and he caught me in the playground and said, "Hey, how would you feel if your parents would allow you to come up to the junior high and maybe practice with some of those guys, because you seem to be pretty good at what you're doing out there?" And I thought it was a great idea, and I did a couple times. My parents weren't too perceptive on the idea of me continuing this. They figured I'm too young, just let it ride its course, and then when I get into junior high, why then I can wrestle. And that's what I did. I went into junior high, wrestled, then got into high school and wrestled, and that was so wrestling was definitely a foundation that I grew up with. I played football too. I was a 2-sport athlete. I don't think I could have handled 3 sports after football and wrestling, but yes, I wrestled in high school, and I was really good my sophomore year. I had a really good year, and towards the end of that year, I went up a level to the varsity. So I started wrestling varsity at the end of my sophomore year, and I think through transitions of football and wrestling and going into my senior year, I had some colleges that were interested in me in my junior year. I started getting letters, and they showed interest. And then sometime during football my senior year, I had an injury where I had pulled my groin really bad. And in any kind of athletic, anything that you're doing that's athletic, you need your core. Right. And I didn't have a core. So when I was on the bottom in wrestling, I couldn't even get myself back up. The match was practically done, and I had a mediocre at best year my senior year. So the letters quit coming. It was kind of depressing to me. I didn't. Quite frankly, I look back at those times. I think I was burnt out. I think I suffered from just burnout from sports because, even at that young age, you don't think that you could get burned out, but, I did. And I had a phenomenal wrestling coach, Mr. Zaboznik. He was a second father to me. This guy taught me more about life than he ever did wrestling, which I'm forever grateful for, and I love that man. But, he kept me strong through those tough times, and I persevered, and another thing I kind of joke around about with my friends is that I went to my first rock concert in high school. I went to go see Rush, and also being a band geek, I didn't realize that drums could be played that way. Hearing Pierce play, and I was fascinated by that, and I wanted to pursue playing drums. So I had other interests come on, and after school, since I wasn't going to wrestle in college, I decided, I'm going to go in the military. That's what I'm going to do. I was watching the movies like Heartbreak Ridge, and I was so gung-ho. And I'm sorry, you were in the Navy, Evan? Or I'm sorry, the Army?
I'm in the Army still. Yep.
Okay, I apologize. I wanted to be a grunt. Okay, I wanted to be a Marine. I wanted to do the obstacle courses. I wanted to do that so bad. I could rip out 21 pull-ups. I wanted to be a drill instructor and all that. And then when I went to MEPS to enlist, they found that I had chronic urticaria, and which was really minor, but they were cutting back. They weren't really enlisting a lot of people. So because of that, I had a permanent discharge medically. So I never got into the military. Thus, I went into the workforce. Well, after a few years of working and, playing in bands, I pursued that. I was playing in bands. I had hair down to the middle of my back with earrings, and it was just crazy. I played the Chicago nightclub circuit for a couple of years. something was missing, and I just wasn't sure what. So I decided to take up martial arts. I'm like, you know what, Mike, you've been away from sports for a while. Maybe you need to get your butt back in shape, because I've been, nutrition wasn't even a concept to me back then. I was at the age where I lived on fast food, macaroni and cheese, and just anything I could pretty much get my hands on at the time. But I started taking hot keto, and through that, they taught some Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I was introduced to Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which was, to me, was incredible, because with all the background in wrestling that I had, once I was taught the Brazilian jiu-jitsu, it became like magic to me. And everything flowed really good. But how did I get into Ultimate Fighting? In high school, I worked at a movie theater, and I worked with this kid. And during our break times, we'd go to our, back in the 80s, our famous video games that were out there. I was a Galaga guy. I played Galaga. Yeah, I had unlimited quarters, and I rocked that thing. And I tried doing it, actually, last year. I found a Galaga, and I don't have the touch any longer. But this other guy played this, like, real lame karate game. And he's getting into it and doing the hip moves, and I'm just like, dude, man, you like this? This is so lame. And he goes, oh, no, look at this hit. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever, whatever you enjoy, that's all good. And when I went to this Hapkido gym, he was there, and we were much older then. We hadn't seen each other in 8 years. And I go, his name's Michael also, and Michael Johnson. I said, Mike, how are you doing? And he looks at me all tough. I'm like, don't you remember me? And when I refreshed his memory, he goes, oh, yeah, how are you doing? So we got talking. Well, his father was a Taekwondo instructor who knew people. And I found out that this Mike guy was fighting in a no-holds-barred match in Chicago. So I went and watched him, and I will quite honestly say, through all the years of cage fighting, ultimate fighting, Bellator, whatever's out there, that first fight that I ever saw with him in it was probably, I don't want to use the word horrific, but he got beaten to a pulp. He went out there with a full gi on and figured the guys are going to grab onto it like he wanted. He had loved the Gracies. He was a huge Gracie fan, as I am. And he went in there and just got beat up. He could almost, on the video, just hear his skull almost like the cheekbones almost shatter from headbutts. It was horrible. And the guy on top started getting tired. And I kid you not, Mike just stayed calm. And in the end, got him in a leg choke around the head and started unleashing throws right to his head. And he came out on top. He was unable to finish or unable to continue, because back then it was all tournament style. There was no one-and-done fights like they have now. And I watched this, and in my mind, I'm like, you know what? I could do this. And I loved the energy of the crowd, and just I was just totally enthralled by this. And I did. And that's how I got into it. My first fight I had was at, I don't know what it's called now, but back then it was called the Marc. It was an arena. It's an arena that's in Moline, Illinois. And, boy, you thought I hit the big time, because when I walked in there, there's this arena with this cage in the middle, and I looked up at the big screen, and Van Halen was coming next week, and I'm thinking, oh, wow. I could care less about the fight. I'm thinking, man, I hit the big time. Van Halen's coming next week, and but the fight, it was really crazy, because I can remember, meeting the fighters. We're all good guys, don't get me. There's a lot of smack talk nowadays, these kids. I just think that, I think a lot of them should just keep their mouths shut and go out there and, let their, fighting do the talking. But, we were all pretty good guys. We all knew each other pretty well. And there were no rules back then at all. The only rules were you couldn't, bite, and you couldn't gouge the eyes. We had a gentleman's agreement that you would never, punch or kick the groin, and that was just pretty much a given. We didn't do that. But I know nowadays they don't allow knees to the body when somebody's down on their knee. It didn't matter if you were on the ground. You could knee somebody's head. It was just really, really crazy.
Yeah, so it's like the first couple UFCs, that was the rules, right? Like I think it was 1 through 3 or something, and then I think 4 and 5 they started adding more rules in.
That's exactly right. Why? Because and I'm not kidding you. I came in right at the time where I was like, why could I do this? Because these guys are strikers and punchers. I'm a wrestler. I know where the fight ends up. I have an advantage. And wrestlers caught on to it real, real quick. Thus, UFC 4 and 5, they started making time limits because nobody wanted to see Royce Gracie on his back getting beat up by Ken Shamrock for 25 minutes when they're spending $100 on a pay-per-view. So, it was a tournament style too. And so once you won, you weren't done. You went on to the next fight. And sometimes there were 3 fights a night. The particular fight at the Marc, there were only 4 of us in a bracket, so there were only 2. And my first fight was against Jeremy Horn. And Jeremy Horn went on to make a very good name for himself. He was an extremely hard worker, a good kid, comes from a good family. He went on to the UFC and made a really good name for himself. That particular fight that I had against him, I felt in control. I didn't. For those of you that want to look it up, it's on YouTube. I think it's about the only footage that I have of anything with me fighting. So it's on YouTube. You can look me up. But
once we put out this podcast, send me the link and I will share it to the Strength and Speed page on Facebook.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And I felt in control. I was in good shape. I was getting a little frustrated with how we were moving around. I had him up against the cage, and he was holding on to it. He would not let me drag him off. So I started using my heel, and I started taking my heel and hitting his foot with it. And I was trying to, get him off steps so I can take him back down to the ground. Now, on this particular video, I think the person that did it put music behind it, but so you can't hear it. But in the real video, the video was taken, the camera was probably about a good 25 yards back. You could hear where I missed his foot and my own heel hit the mat. You could hear the thud over the crowd. And I was wondering the next day, why was my heel so sore? That was why, because I'd shattered a couple of, kind of bone spurs in my heel because I'd missed. But he caught me in a triangle choke and threw some elbows in there, and that was it. It was really quick. And I remembered before the fight, it was really crazy. It was like the movie Gladiator. They don't want you out there walking around watching the fights. They want you backstage, and you could hear the roar of the crowd. You see these fighters getting introduced, going out, and you hear the roar of the crowd. And then they're coming back. They're all bloodied up and they're bruised. It was something out of a movie. And then I wasn't getting nervous, but I was like, okay, game on, game on. I was ready for this. But I'll be honest with you. After that particular fight, my heart had never pounded so hard in my life. In all honesty, when I was backstage, I was glad that I lost because I didn't think that I could go back out there without having a heart attack.
So that was your first one, and then if you're that stricken up by it, how did you end up going out for what apparently was 3 more?
Oh, well, the second one was against Paul Wells, and that was at, I don't remember really where that was at. It was at an oversized bar with kind of like a little mini stadium type seating, Coliseum type place. I don't know. But anyhow, about 4 days prior to that fight, I developed something that was really bad. I had like 103 degree fever maybe, and I was miserable. I went into the ER to get horse pills. I'm like, do what you got to do to get rid of this because I got to fight and whatever. They're like, you're not fighting. I'm like, well, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I need to get rid of it. they don't look too kindly on you if, they promoted your name to be in a fight and all of a sudden, I've been sick. I can't show up. So needless to say, I showed up and I held my own. I went out there for 5 minutes and I just started getting gassed. I didn't have the energy left in me. And because of that, I started taking hits to the head. I gave him my back. I turned my stomach to the ground. He couldn't choke me out because I have no neck to begin with. So he just started throwing elbows, and the video at the time was showing my head bouncing off the mat, and my corners didn't think I was even going to lose. They're looking for the towel, and they couldn't find it. So I saw him scrambling, so I tapped out. I went with it, and I just tapped out. I'm like, I'm getting my head beat to a pulp. I'm surprised they didn't stop it ahead of time, but, so that was my second loss.
All right, so now you're 0-2. What's your mindset moving forward?
Oh, my God. I was like, this is crazy. What am I doing? I wasn't sure I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know if I wanted to keep going on with it or if I wanted to I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got a phone call at the house. There was a gentleman that called and said that they were having tryouts for like a fighting circuit that was going to go around the country, and they were really interested in me coming. They knew I was a grappler. They liked my style, and they pretty much just really buttered me up to come. And there's going to be other fighters. They said we're going to have fighters from, kung fu to taekwondo, and I'm thinking, well, geez, if you're going to bring these guys in, that's great. And just for the record, the highest belt I ever received was like yellow. It was like the second belt up in Hapkido. I owned no belts at all. Belts are just really a level of discipline, because when it comes to a fight, the game changes really. But so they told me this address in Chicago. And they said, we'll worry about the promoting and everything. You show up at this time, blah, 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 blah. So I brought my gear, trained, showed up, and it was in this warehouse. It was kind of shady. It was really weird. It was on the south side of Chicago. It wasn't really a great neighborhood, I would say, but it wasn't, it wasn't the best. And I went downstairs in this basement. The guy introduced himself, said, here's the locker room and whatnot. We got a mat out there, and when we call you guys, you can come out there. And it was basically an audition for bigger things, that as I was told. So I went out there, and my first fight, I went up. I wish I remembered their names, but I don't. The first fight, I went up against a guy that was in Taekwondo. I don't think he had any kind of grappling experience at all, because I clinched right away and took him down and pretty much passed him out with a rear naked choke pretty instantly.
Nice.
Yeah, that was actually that was painless, I should say. That was nice. And then I had about a half hour until my next fight, and then I went up against the guy that was a kung fu expert. He came out here with this crazy stance or something. I'm like, okay, whatever. And also for the record, I am not a striker, a puncher, or I hit like a girl. So I don't punch at all very good. So if I get you to the ground, you're going to have problems. But standing up boxing, forget it. I'm not that guy. But I was able to get him to the ground, rolled around a little bit, and there was a problem for him because I got on a front mount on top of him. And he was trying to get out of it and could go nowhere. He knew not to give me his back because I'd choke him out, so he stayed face up. And I just started throwing an onslaught of punches right to his head. And I busted his nose right away. I knew it because his blood, the blood just started squirting. I started throwing elbows and just the energy. And I looked up at the guy that was officiating like, hey, are you going to stop this? And he says, no, keep going. So I kept going, because the adrenaline's flowing, and the guy looked like he was dead, and he was out cold, and they finally stopped it, and that was it, and I think I got paid $50 for the day, which was, I don't know,
nice.
For me. Yeah, exactly, right. When all was said and done, and I look back at it, I don't think it was. I don't think it was what they told me it was. I don't think it was any kind of audition. I think it was a guy that got together a bunch of people that were in suits and dresses, and they were gambling and drinking, and I think it was more or less for their entertainment type thing.
Yeah, like a private UFC party.
Exactly, and it was a little spooky for me. I didn't, I wasn't, I was kind of scared. I didn't, because I came from a small country town, that was not my style at all. So, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after that. So I came out, with a 2-2 record, and, some of the things that I dealt with after these fights, after Jeremy Horn fight, the next day I was nauseous. I would walk in a straight line. The next thing you know, she's my wife now, but my girlfriend, when she was with me, would have to grab me because I would totally start walking sideways. I had no balance. My equilibrium was completely off. I suffered concussions from the hits to the head.
Yeah.
And this was before, concussion protocol was out there and whatnot. And I got thinking about that. I'm like, well, why don't they have that in fighting? Well, there's too much money in it. They would have had it in boxing years ago. There's unions for football, and so these guys are going up against the owners and this and that. But in fighting, you're out there for yourself, and you don't hear anything about these fighters now. All these big names that were out there, back in the day, you're not hearing anything about them now. And I would be willing, and this is just my opinion, this isn't the opinion of UFC or whatnot, but in another 5 or 10 years, you're going to start hearing some really nasty horror stories of some of these has-beens, per se, or fighters that are no longer fighting. I saw a guy urinating blood from being kicked in the kidneys too many times.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is if there's always another person willing to take your place, they'll just be like, all right, you want to complain about stuff? We'll just move on to the next guy. And someone else will get in the ring for their,
exactly.
couple $1,000s.
Oh, exactly. And the money ain't even worth it. And there's people out there that are trying to raise families on it. And I'm just like, ugh.
So kind of interesting. I saw a couple-minute YouTube clip from a hockey player who has severe TBI, traumatic brain injury. And
Yep.
he was like, he'd won several Stanley Cups, and he's like, I would give all those Stanley Cups back. He's like, just to be normal again. And it was like, damn, it's kind of like grounds people, especially when you're in a sport and you're going for it. It's like the most important thing in the world, and you feel like you'd give almost anything to get to that next level. So,
and that's exactly right. And you talk about that mindset too. Mindset going into the fights. The words of relentless. I mean, I was, you had a controlled frenzy, but you were uncontrollable. I wasn't afraid of anybody or anything. I'm only 5'9", and I only weighed about 215 pounds at the time. But the guys that I was training with were, linemen at the University of Tennessee and the University of Illinois, weighed over 300 pounds, and kind of like the movie, Talladega Nights, where the kid says, "Grandpa, I'm going to climb you like a spider monkey." That's essentially what I was doing to these guys. I would, climb them and choke them out, and it was scary because they were getting frustrated, and then they wanted to hurt me, and I'm like, "No, don't hurt me. Just be my training partner, please." But I wasn't afraid of anything or anybody. I was out there to do my stuff, and I don't want to say if I killed you, I killed you, but if something like that happened, you made the choice to go out there, and that was my mindset. Then I look back at it now, and it's kind of frightening. It's because people that know me, this is what's so fascinating about this, Evan, is because I tell people that I don't even really talk about it much anymore. But when it comes out that Mike used to be a cage fighter, and nobody believes it at all. The wrestling part of it, they're like, I can see you still look like you're 47. My God, you still look like you're a wrestler. But the fighting, because I wouldn't hurt a fly. I'm one of the kindest souls that you'd ever meet, and they don't get it. And sometimes I use that to my advantage, because I'm like, you know what, good. Remember that when you get me mad. So, but no, I don't at all. But yeah, that was a very nasty time set or a mindset back at that time.
On some level, I can relate. I've never done actual fighting. I mean, I've done some combatives training for the military, but when I look back on some of my deployments, a little bit different, but like daily for a year, like I thought about killing people on a daily basis, right? Like,
yes,
legitimately going out and shooting someone in their face. Like when I look back on that, I think of it. Just seems like an unhealthy mindset to have, spread out over a long period of time and for multiple trips. So I can relate on some level. So.
Oh yeah. That's I've got a friend that years ago that went over to Kuwait, and I did Bible study with him, and one of the most faithful men I'd ever known in my life, and he came back a different guy, and never the same, and it was just really, really frightened me. But yeah, he didn't talk about it too much, nor did I want him to.
All right, so now let's talk about your training. What did your training look like when you were preparing for these fights?
Okay, are you ready to laugh? This is really crazy because training back then for something like MMA, it wasn't even called mixed martial arts MMA. They had it wasn't even the UFC. It was the Ultimate Fighting Championship, no holds barred. So you got guys that were coming out of the bars who had some martial arts experience. One particular venue that I was at, I just got done eating. I don't know if you've ever heard of Portillo's. It's a Chicago dog place that I grew up on, but I had a ton of hot dogs and fries. I think I had a chocolate shake, and I went to this fight to go watch, and they didn't have a fighter show up, and they wanted to know if I could go in there. And I contemplated. I'm like, yeah, I want to fight, but I'm like, oh, that would not look good if I vomit my dinner everywhere, So nutrition was just, it wasn't, I had horrible nutrition. I wasn't taught good nutrition back then. Training, I used to grapple and go to Hapkido 3 times a week. And at the time I was working midnights. So this would go on during the mornings. I do weights 5 times a week. I was doing weights because I was still old school. I figured, I got to be strong. I got to go in there. I got to power my house through this stuff, And that was really overkill. I look back at it now. Cardio 3 times a week. I get on the Stairmaster. We didn't really have a ton of ellipticals then. We had Stairmasters at some of the health clubs that I would get on. They had a running track, and I hate running. Running is not my thing. I think I'd do a mile and say, okay, I'm good. I think I'll go do something else. So I relied solely on my grappling skills when it came to conditioning. But one thing I was pretty passionate about was something that was easier on me with my cardio was I swam. I do a lot of swimming. I do laps above water, and I do laps underwater too. And people are like, well, geez, why would you do something crazy like that and hold your breath? I said, well, when somebody's got their arm around you and they're choking you out and you got to remain calm, you got to be able to hold your breath for a little bit.
Yeah, you have to get used to that hypoxic feeling because the first time it hits you, people get panicky, even though they still have several, another 20 seconds before they're going to black out, right?
Right, and usually that works well with like rear naked chokes. Unfortunately for me, when Jeremy Horn caught me, he caught me with a grapevine with the legs, and my head was ready to pop like a grape. So I didn't stand much of a chance there. But one of the things, and then on Sundays, sometimes we'd get together. And this was new to me. This is a part of my life now, but this was new to me. We would get together, some of us guys, on Sundays, and we would do circuit training, kind of like a HIIT training with body bags and a little bit of grappling. And, that swore me out. I had never really done anything like that before. They talked in PE when I was in high school about you should do circuit training where you go 30 seconds on and 15 off and this and that's great for you. And I'm thinking, you guys are a bunch of pansies. Who's going to do that? It just wasn't a part of our most of our culture then at the time, So, I did a lot of that. And then as far as like supplements, I really didn't take anything. A scary thing though was that, and I'm not speaking for all fighters. I knew some, and I would never bring up names, but one of the real popular supplements back then was ephedrine, and we would take this with coffee, just to kind of give us that little bit of edge, not really knowing what it was doing to us. And I think a lot of that had to do with why my heart was racing so hard after I had fought against Jeremy Horn, thinking I was going to have a heart attack. I didn't take any before that fight or anything like that, but that was really, really popular back then. And
that was popular up until like the late 90s, I think. I don't think it was banned until probably like 2000.
Exactly. You can't get it anywhere. Yeah, you can't unless it's prescribed, I would guess. I don't know, but yeah. But that became an addiction for me too. I mean, that was really, really bad, and I was able to cut it and everything, but it was that stuff's nasty. I mean, and there were a lot of people doing it, because how do you, even NFL players, they got to be on some kind of pain meds, because how can you, back before they had SOD, how could you go out there week after week and take a beating on AstroTurf like nothing had ever happened? Stuff like that. You had to do something, and that was what a lot of fighters were doing back then.
All right, so let's start transitioning more towards OCR. So, based off your fighting experience, what's the best lesson you think you can pull out of that for OCR, whether that be for open wave athletes or for maybe guys going for the more elite level trying to win races?
Oh, my gosh, this is a tough question. But you know what? I thought about it, and I would have to say, if anything, is patience. Learning to be patient and focus. Learning to be patient and focus. When you're fighting, you have obstacles coming at you 100% of the time, whether it's your conditioning, whether you have punches or kicks being thrown at your head, that constant pressure, that grappling, you're constantly moving, that force, learning how to, that constant thinking of, how am I going to counter move this, or what am I going to do now? I mean, it's just constant. The roar of the crowd, the screaming people telling you, do this. It's just crazy. All this stuff coming at you. You'd be surprised how much easier it is when you block all that out and you just focus and breathe. Learning how to breathe, learning how to keep calm, under pressure. And I think for OCR, that's one of the things that OCR has taught me, and I do meditation, but like I said, I'm not a runner, but what breathing has done is taught me how to listen to my breath, how to listen to my heart, how to hear how everything's working, hearing nature, just listening and being totally focused on what I'm doing. In OCR, you don't have people throwing punches at you. The worst that's going to happen is you're going to hit the ground, or you're going to have some wood up the side of your gut, or rope burn or something, But yeah, that's what that's what I'm thinking. Just remaining calm and enjoying it and just loving it.
Well, one of the things I think is interesting about MMA is just the number of different disciplines you can practice on, right? I mean, you can practice your jiu-jitsu or hapkido or striking, and that kind of reminds me in some aspects of OCR where, if you spend too much time running or focusing on strength training, you might have trouble with the running, or if you spend too much time on the obstacles, or, vice versa. You spend too much time running, you have trouble with the obstacles because now your upper body is a little bit more weak. So I think the balance there is somewhat comparable.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, because, and especially with fighters now, I could never do it if I wanted, because these guys are really, really well-rounded. They can kick, they can punch, they can grapple, they can do it all. I wouldn't last a second in there against some of these young kids right now. But yeah, that's what I like about the OCR is that I can. It's all around. I can focus on, getting back some of the strength that I've lost through the years in my shoulders and certain things, and it's just my overall fitness level has improved incredibly. And quite frankly, I feel a lot better in shape now than I even did back when I was fighting.
Cool. So how did you end up finding OCR?
Oh my gosh, this is really funny. So, I've taken my dad at working out, through the years, Let's fast forward. I got married and had 3 kids. And I'd take cage fighting again any day over raising 3 kids. But, no, I'm just kidding. I love my children to death. But, I sat on the couch for the better of 12 years, and, a lot of things happened to the body in the meantime. I developed type 2 diabetes. I manage it. I work out, and my wife didn't notice anything. She was getting frustrated. She's like, Mike, all I see you do is working out, and I'm not noticing anything. She was just, hounding and nagging like wives do sometimes to us guys. We want to be left alone. We're working at it. We're trying. We're using every excuse in the world, and she's jealous because she doesn't have somewhere because I work out where I work, so I have a fitness center there, so I'll do weights and cardio there. She doesn't really have anywhere where she could work out at. So I'm like, well, then do something about it. Quit arguing with me about it and do something about it. So we got all caught up on her bills, and she did. She went and bought a membership, and I said, you spent what? So she went out and got herself a membership and joined this gym, and I noticed a change in 2 weeks. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Good for you. And she's like, well, you know what? They have a couples challenge coming up, and it's a transformation challenge where you could lose some weight. And I'm like, oh, no. I said, I lived on the scale for years. There is no way you are going to get me to do any kind of challenge or any kind of weight loss. I know what I'm doing. I know how to work out. I don't need somebody telling me. And I was very adamant that was not going to happen. And I was at work, and I was thinking about it, and I'm like, who are you fooling? I need to do something. So I called Kristen up and said, Kristen's my wife. I said, hey, you know what, go ahead. If there's a room in that challenge, go ahead and enroll me. That's fine. I'll do it with you. It might be good for the both of us, be a good marriage-building character. So I did that, and the very first week I lost 25 pounds. It was my body had so much water weight. It was just, I was in that bad I was almost 300 pounds. I was in really, really bad shape. I had an A1C of 13.1. Right now it's at 5.4. It's really, really good. Yeah, the first week I lost 25 pounds, and then I'm like, you know what? Game on. I went into wrestling mode. I'm like, okay, I got this. I know how to do it. Because the winner won a cruise for 2 to anywhere they wanted to go, in the world pretty much. So, and that's what happened. In a period of 6 weeks, I lost 15 inches, 7% body fat, and 44 pounds.
Damn.
Yeah, boy, I'm telling you. And you know what? I worked for every bit of that, man. I ran. I mean, like I said, I went in. I did everything that I should have been doing back in the day. So it was like redemption for me. And we won. We won a cruise. I went down to Honduras, Belize, Costa Maya, Cozumel, and it was like a second honeymoon for us. And so now my focus in fitness has changed. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And one of the guys at work has said, hey, have you ever seen that Broken Skull Challenge? I'm like, no, what's that? Oh, it's on CMT. You should watch it. So, we talk shows. So I turned it on, and I see Steve Austin. I'm like, oh, this guy's a hoot. Listen to this, And I'm watching it, And I see these guys wrestling and grappling. I think at the time I watched it, I'm drawing a blank. Hackenbarth was on there. And I'm thinking, man, this guy's fit, man. This guy's got a lot of leverage. Look at him. there's a part of me that would, and I had no idea Miles did that. That's crazy. I had to have seen him and just didn't even know it. But
well, you're breaking Brenna's heart right now because she loves to talk Broken Skull because she's been on it twice. So.
Oh, has he? Oh, well, I'll tell you what. I have no problem. This was then. I had no problem. I would have no problem going up against any of them guys. Okay, when it came to like the combative part of it, like the hand-to-hand stuff, when it came to some of the strength stuff, I probably would have lacked on some of that stuff, like taking weights up the hill and everything, and hooking and just things like that. I may not have done good, but and I know that there's skill involved in that too. So I'm not saying that but I used to get a kick out of these guys talking trash to each other. I'm like, man, listen to you guys. And then this guy named Hunter McIntyre came on, and I'm watching him, and I'm thinking, okay, this has got to be scripted. This guy, I'm thinking, what a clown, man. This guy cannot be real, And then he ate up the field, and he did the course, and he comes back week after week, and I'm thinking, man, this guy is just – I just thought, man, this guy is something else. And then after getting into our OCR and listening to him talk and seeing him on videos and whatnot, I'm thinking, man, this is how he really is, He's a good guy, no doubt about it, but I thought maybe it was a script or something, but he is everything that he says he is, And we just I thought I could do all that stuff, but everybody wants their jab at the obstacle course at the end, and that was the last thing that I wanted. I'm like, okay, the Broken Skull obstacle course, forget it. I want no part of that. But then, I had some things in life. I've had things through my life happened that I don't really wish upon a lot of people. But like, my mother passed away when I was just before I was 21. So when I turned 21, I was off to the races. That gave me a reason to drink, So I pretty much got that out of my system pretty early. My dad got ill when I was 32, and that was kind of ugly. He had a stroke, and he had nothing written down, power of attorney, living will, nothing. So here I was, in the hospital. He couldn't move. I had to take his hand and lawyer's papers so I could have the rights to say pull the plug or whatnot and everything, and I essentially had to do that. Then when I was 38. My older sister passed away unexpectedly. She had something going on with her heart where it was she had some sort of hormones that were like producing adrenaline to the heart, and she basically had a heart attack in her sleep. She didn't even know that it happened. It was I forgot what it was called, but it's really, really rare, and that really took me back. I was kind of broken by that. And then a year ago, next week, my little brother Sean, he was 39. He was home on family leave because my sister-in-law was pregnant with their second child. He has a 3-year-old, and they had a 5-day-old son. So Miles was 5 days old, and Sean went outside, and it was something where the electrical system to his heart, like an athlete, just stopped, and he dropped dead. And
wow.
I went through. That was really, and I'm a man of God. I'm very faithful, and that one shook me really, really hard. And it took me a while to get back my fire. I do public speaking. I talk about balance in life. I talk about physical, emotional, spiritual, and intellectual needs that we have. And I know all the things that we need in life, and I just wasn't feeling it. I didn't have it in my life. And I needed something. And the only way that I could find any kind of peace in anything, because I'd lost all this weight now and I started eating out of comfort, I got to start exercising again. And that's what led me into OCR. A good friend of mine that I work with lives out in Merced, California, Aaron Hess. He does Spartan races religiously. And I'd been following his posts. And I figured, you know what, I need to do something like this. I need to relearn how to set goals in life. And that's what brought me into OCR. I just had to restart. and I had to learn how to set goals. I started listening to Joe DeSena's Spartan Up podcasts, and thus, which led me to, your podcasts and, Linked Endurance, all these I've been listening to all these positive podcasts, and the OCR world is just, it's unbelievable. The people are just, they're a dream. They're so complimentary to each other, and they help each other out, and it's an amazing world that is so small still, but yet just growing, and I wanted to be a part of that. So, it was mainly because I needed to restart my life, and I needed to start setting goals, and I figured what better way of doing it than running up mountains in mud. So,
well, that's awesome. We are glad to have you here, and I'm glad you found a nice place and a friendly community here in OCR. I think that's what, us being everyone on the inside feels that way, but it's hard to get that message out sometimes. So I'm glad you found it real quick and have fallen headfirst into the community. So what are your future plans for OCR?
Well, my future plans are, I have a Spartan Beast that I'm training for right now. That's going to be in September. I'm 1 week off of pulling my hamstring. I was doing some wind sprints on the treadmill and felt like it tore it right in half, and I'm back to light jogs now. It's recovering really quick, and I'm still taking it easy. Miles says, "Don't you dare train hard." I'm like, "Okay, I won't. Don't worry." So, I'm doing that right now, and I'll get myself back into cardio shape for that. And then the week after, I'm doing the terrain race in Oshkosh. And it's even become not even just something that I'm doing. The whole family's getting involved. My wife is at boot camp throwing tires around, and it's just really crazy. I'm like, "You're doing what?" She's a director of religious education, and she's throwing tires around and running up hills. So
that's awesome.
I know, right? And my little guy ran the kids Spartan up in Minneapolis. And this is a funny story because we got there, I got him at the starting line, and I'm ready to go with him and everything. And my wife's off to the side by the spectators, and I'm getting him jacked up. He's been kind of like watching what I've been doing, kind of emulating it. So they say to go, and I started with him, and he just takes off, and I get jogging up the hill, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm already tired. And I've got a race still. This is nuts. What have I got myself into?" So I let my wife run around and take the photos and everything. And I just kind of kept my cool, and just kind of rested before I had to go out there. But it was the very first thing I had to do up in Minneapolis was the first hill that went up. There was a rain delay for about 3 hours, so it was saturated in mud. And I literally had to bear crawl up that first hill. I could not get any kind of traction. My Fitbit, it took me 20 minutes to get up the first hill. I was even going off course to try to grab the terrain, and it was just coming out of the ground. But that's where I had to dig deep. And I'm like, okay, do I really want this or do I not? I've trained hard for this. So, those are the types of things that you face. And it's a real positive challenge. And as far as future plans, maybe cage fighting, because I keep getting asked that when I lost all that weight. The rumors were that I was going to fight again, and I kind of led people on that it was going to happen, but it was the farthest thing from the truth. My little guy is in wrestling now, and I'm not going to push him. I'm going to let him do it and enjoy it, have fun with it. So I go and I roll around with the kids, and I do a little bit of coaching with some of the coaches here in the town that I live in, and we go on tournaments on weekends and do some of that stuff. I used to be an official for the Illinois High School Association in wrestling before I did the Ultimate Fighting, and I thought about doing that again, but the problem with that is that I don't see it the same anymore. I can see somebody wrestling and putting a kid into a full Nelson, which is illegal in folk style, and I'm thinking, hey, this guy's got a pretty good move, do something with it. So I don't have the I don't know if I took too many hits. I don't get it. I can't do it anymore,
Very interesting hearing some of these early days of fighting. Have you listened to, there's a podcast, a 30 for 30 by ESPN about the first days of the UFC. Have you heard that one?
You know what? I haven't, but I think I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, so it's a podcast. It's not a video, but
Okay.
yeah, if anyone's interested in that, I think it was really good. It talks about like UFC 1 and how basically how they got all these guys into one room, and then them explaining the rules, and basically the event almost didn't happen, and it's like, essentially the next night. So it's a really interesting podcast. I think UFC itself, especially the very first couple ones, are just fascinating because people have no idea what they're doing, right?
The thing was, Evan, too, is that even when I was fighting, it was banned in most every state. I mean, I was jumping between states because you couldn't fight 1 month here or 1 month there. I mean, nobody wanted it. I mean, there was a politician that said what I did to Jeremy Horn was inhumane, and it was in the paper the next day. So, I mean, yeah, it was a different world back then.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Before we let you go, any final shout-outs you want to give, family, friends, or anything like that?
Oh, my gosh. Definitely a shout-out to my wife, Kristen. I love her to death. She's the wind underneath my wings. She supports me in everything that I do. My children, who I hate so much. No, I'm kidding. I love my daughter, Madeline, and Emma, and Jacob. I want to give a big shout-out to my friend Aaron Hess out in Merced, California, for being such an inspiration to me to pursue OCR racing and just shooting ideas at each other. A shout-out to Miles. We kind of met by accident. I friended him because he was an OCR, and he texted me, "Hey, what's up?" I'm like, "Oh, how you doing?" So we, that's how that friendship started. So, yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's great, and like I've talked about on this podcast before, the sport's built on the 90% of the people. 90%. The open wave makes up like 90% of the population for OCR, and without them, and without people like you and your family participating, there would not be a sport. So, personal thank you for me, and to all the open waivers out there and everyone else showing up to races, because without large numbers, these races are not profitable, and without a profit, there is no race, period. So, before I let everyone go for this podcast, head over and check out Soflete. So I recently wrote an article for Soflete about quitting. You can head over to their page or look at my Facebook page. It should be on there, or my Instagram. It should be on there too. But I was also recently on their podcast talking about OCR, not only from a training perspective, but also as a business perspective, and kind of how I've navigated my way through some of that, and how some of my experiences in the military have crossed over and affected and made some of the decisions I have made for OCR. So guys at Soflete are great. If you're confused what the name Soflete is, it's Special Operations Forces Athlete is kind of the amalgamation, is how they came up with their company name. So pretty cool company, bunch of cool guys over there. Besides having a podcast, there's a blog on their website. They do apparel, and then they also do supplements. So, and they do training plans. So kind of like you sign up, and then they put you in, I think, like an online Facebook group, and then you can actually pick what kind of training plan you want to, and it's coached by special operations dudes. So pretty cool program they have going on over there. Check them out. I know they have a big interest in starting to get more involved in the OCR community, so I think we'll be hearing some big things from them coming up in the next year or two. Cool. Well, again, Mike, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Yep, and I will we'll catch up with you later.
All right, bud.